more or less volunteering at our local veterans hospital. My mom's a head nurse, and I was doing it as a favor. Working in the cafeteria all night, it's a Christmas party. Tons of family visiting. Be me, a Marine and a firefighter, and the regular cafeteria staff working our butts off. Finally, we get to leave. Walk to the elevator, go down to the ground floor and walk out to my car. Got in and drove off. I realized I left my wallet in the nurse's station, so I turned around, super annoyed with myself, and drove back. Went into the back parking lot. No lights on, so it's really dark. I parked and got out. As I stood up, an older woman is looking at me from the driver's side of another car. It looks like she had just stepped out of her car. I waved and she just looked at me. Okay. We walk in pretty much together. She's only 5 to 6 steps behind me. I held the door open for her and she shuffled in. Again, she's just giving me a very strange look. Not a dirty one, just more of a confused one. We get into the elevator together. I looked at her, then looked at the buttons and say, "Ma'am, which floor are you going to?" She replied, 7. "Ma'am, there are only 5 floors," as I hit the button for floor 3 and 5 for her. I can see her the whole ride up. She never replied to me about floor 7. I get to my floor and the doors open up and I step out. She had scooted to the side of the elevator, so my line of sight with her broke for like 2 seconds. Get out. Look back into the elevator. Nobody's there. No way she scooted around me that fast without me seeing. I noped out of there for hours after that. Be me and my friend, 15 years of age, chilling out on his property one fine day, ways away from anyone or anything. 6,000 acres to mess around on. Anything is possible. It's around 1 in the afternoon. Decided to go for a drive down to his cattle paddock. Pass through gate to massive flat paddock surrounded by trees. Goes on forever. He tells me there's 2 spooky old houses sitting on his property down a trail we're checking out. Let's roll.gif. Cruising down trail in ute. House appears in the distance. Friend idles up to it slowly as he gives me the rundown of the place. Tells me they were renting it out to some old bloke, weird guy, who died in there a few years ago. Broad daylight, so adventure mode kicks in. Get out of ute and approach this dump. It's falling to pieces, gives off the worst vibe. Air literally feels cooler in its presence. Remove front door that is half off its hinges. Light piercing through cracks in the roof and boards in the windows. Dank and dusty as fuck in here. Messing with my lungs. Tell mate to go on ahead. Go back to ute to grab my bottle of water. Sitting in ute with door open, drinking my water, observing creepy-ass shack. All of a sudden, mate comes flying out of the front door. The expression on his face made me feel physically ill. Never seen a human being look so messed up and disturbed. He was pale as all shit and had a soul-crushing look on his face. Jumps straight into the ute and fires it up, and we begin reversing dramatically. Ask him, "WTF, Annan? What's wrong with you? You good, man? Stop, we're good." Doesn't respond. Just keeps reversing until we spin around and take off back up the trail. Sitting in silence. Shit got real. We're absolutely hammering it up this trail. Took us half the time to get back to the paddock as it did getting down to that house. We come to a sudden stop as my mate pierces us through the tree line back onto the open paddock from which we came. Ute slides to a stop as we're side-on looking back down the trail. The silence is intense. My mind is racing, wondering what is happening. Look over to my friend, still looks shocked as all get out. Slowly turns to me, lifeless expression. I ask, "Dude, you're actually scaring me. What the hell happened?" Says after I went back to the ute, he made his way into the lounge room and started examining all the stuff in there, as it was scattered all over the joint. Said he approached the old couch in the middle of the room facing an old broken TV set. Takes a break for a few seconds. He still wasn't all there in the head, I started looking down the trail as my heart sank. I just knew he was going to say something messed up. He went on to say there was an old mirror laying in front of the couch, and he went over and picked it up because it looked insanely clean to be in that old dump. Reckons when he picked it up and looked into it, after a few seconds he noticed the old man over in the corner, jerking about and his face distorting in ways no one could imagine. Horrible stuff, he says. Says all of a sudden he came flying at him, mate still watching it happen in the mirror all over a few seconds. Says he threw the mirror down and piss-bolted out of there, hearing a disgusting cry as he went flying back out the front to me. I heard nothing, and that's the messed up part. I'm sitting there, stunned from hearing that shit, trying not to make eye contact with the trail. Freaking out at this point, we're still sitting in silence for a few minutes. Friend pukes out the window of the ute, out of nowhere. Tell him to get in the passenger seat and I'm getting us back home. As I'm about to start the ute to take off, my friend yells, "Wait!" Scared me half to death. I replied, "What is it?" He's just staring down the trail. At that point, I had goosebumps and was feeling very overwhelmed. Dead quiet too. Not one sound. All of a sudden, he jerks his head back around to me and yells, "Drive, drive!" Flip my shit and punch it, dangerously hooning through this paddock back towards the gate. As I'm driving, I'm yelling, "What the hell" to him. He's literally crying, saying he can smell rotting meat/flesh. Pukes out of the window again. I smell nothing, air as fresh as a daisy. Freaking out, get to the gate, scream at him to jump out and open it. He just sits there. "Annan, open the gate." Just looks at me blankly. Adrenaline kicks in and I jump out, open it, jump back into the ute and take off up towards the house, leaving the gate wide open. Screw it. Get back inside his yard, stop ute, and sit there in silence for about a minute. I wait for him to say something, but he doesn't. So I say, "Dude, stop messing around, are you alright? What the hell is going on, man?" He starts to look a bit better, just looking at me in shock, but his color's back in his face. Tells me when we were sitting at the trail, an overwhelming stench of death wafted over him. Said it was unbearable. Told him I didn't smell a thing. I'm confused and panicky as shit. We parked the ute and walked down to the fence around his yard and stare down towards the paddock. Tells me he's petrified and wants to come stay with me for a few days. We were there alone and his parents wouldn't be back for a few more days. Tell him I definitely agree and I didn't want to stay there overnight anyways. I lived back in town. Go inside his house and ring my mom. She arrives 2 hours later to pick us up. Longest wait of our lives. When she arrives, we just act normal, get in the car and go. Talking about it when we get back to my place in town. We're calm now so we can discuss it better and try to figure out WTF happened at that place. Have a good chat about it and then drop it for a while to do normal shit. Fast forward 2 days. Friend has been staying with me. Get a call from his parents, they're home. Tells us he needs to come home ASAP, he's in trouble. Why? That gate I left open. It had been ripped off its post and was in the middle of my friend's fucking yard. I shit you not. I go silent and just pass him the phone, thinking to myself sadly, I'm so glad I'm not you right now, bro. So glad. Watching him on the phone as his face returns to the color it was when I first saw him run out of that shack. Head falls in my hands. This is not happening. How could it be? He hangs the phone up, says he's got to go home. Tell him I understand. His parents come to pick him up and he leaves. I sit in my room, eagerly awaiting him to sign on to Skype. When he finally does, he says the gate was scratched to shit. It's made of heavy wood, and was laying where I had initially parked the ute after our mad dash back to the yard. Silence. Just no words. No words for the situation. Tell him it'll be alright. Could have been some hick that occasionally comes to pinch his star pickets. He agrees and sounds like he's trying to convince himself. We end the call. Fast forward again about 2 to 3 days. After all that, I was just glad to be home, and I didn't communicate with my friend too much in those days because he freaked me out pretty bad. Phone rings. I answer. It's him. Tells me instantly that the half-hinge door we ripped off to enter the place is back on the hinge. I don't want to hear about this. Annan, please. Keep saying, dude, it's back on the hinge, over and over. Ask him how he even knows this. Did his stupid ass go back there? Tells me he went back for a cruise down to the paddock with his dad to feed the cattle. And his dad wanted to collect something from the shack that had been there for ages. Says he was terrified but didn't tell his dad anything. Just went along with it since his dad was there. Said he nearly passed out when they pulled up to the house and the door was back on the hinge, half off as it previously was. Said he panicked and stayed in the car. His dad got out and went around the back of the house to collect an old stepladder and was only gone a few minutes. And told me he freaked out when his dad walked out the front door of the shack. Nearly gave him a heart attack. His dad put the stuff in the tray of the ute and got back in. Before he could start it up and drive off, my friend said he asked him why he came out of the front of the house. He would have used the old back door. Said he needed to check on something in the shack that he was concerned about. Friend musters up the courage to ask him what. Said his dad said the old man was a good friend of his that wouldn't have been strange throughout his older years. Said after his wife died, he went batshit crazy and died of a stroke or some shit. Said he wanted to check if his wife's mirror was still in the lounge room where he last saw it. Said it was dear to the old man, only thing he had left of his wife. Friend starts crying to me over the phone. Says his dad said it was still there, right where it's always been, sitting in front of the lounge chair where the old man died with it in between his feet. Silence. Friend is crying, and I'm just sitting in shock as my spine begins to tingle. MFW. That mirror broke when my friend threw it down at the ground before he ran. Be me, 17 years old, 1993, in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, near the Sandhills. We just had Christmas at my grandparents' farm, in the middle of nowhere. Like, the next door neighbor was about a mile away, middle of nowhere. And Christmas was cool there. We got the entire extended family together. There were like 40 people in the house exchanging gifts, singing songs, and doing the type of shit white people did on farms in the US in the 90s. Everyone goes home except for me. My grandparents were really old, and my grandfather could barely walk. My grandma could walk, but it was more of a shuffle and she couldn't climb stairs. Family needed me to spend about a week taking care of my grandparents. Cool, no problem. I love old people and I love my grandparents. Grandparents go to bed. I go upstairs to go to bed, but I'm not tired. I chill listening to my cassette player. It's how we had to listen to music before computers and MP3s. Listening to Nirvana's Nevermind and trying to go to sleep. Really happy because I loved the solitude of my grandparents' farm and I loved my family. I was basking in the fields that were left over from all the people in the house. I hear someone come up the stairs, but I think nothing of it because people were going up and down the stairs all day. This person opens the attic door and goes in. All of a sudden it hits me. Shitmypants.jpg. I'm the only person that should be in this house that can actually climb stairs. Holy shit, someone broke in. Now, my grandma taught me to be a badass. I have literally seen this woman beat the shit out of 2,000-pound bulls. She was like 100 pounds. After she did that, she looked at my 9-year-old ass and said, "Never be afraid of anything." Here's 17-year-old me remembering that. Remembering my grandma and grandpa needed me to step up and defend them. I wasn't going to back down from shit. If someone broke into the house, I decided they were going to have to kill me before I would let them hurt my grandparents. I get up and grab my great uncle's baseball bat that was in my bedroom. I open the attic, turn the light, and I was about to fuck some shit up. Side note, that attic was always creepy AF. I never played in there and always avoided it as a kid. I ran roughshod over that farm and every building, but that attic, forget that attic. It was always cold, even in the summer, and that house didn't have any air conditioner. It was creepy. Back to the story. Adrenaline was pumping. I was ready to kill. I've always trended toward the fight side of the fight or flight response anyway. I was kind of looking forward to a fight at this point. I opened the attic door. WTF. No one in the attic. Move some stuff around to see if someone is hiding. Still don't see anyone. Forget it. They must have gone downstairs. I checked the rest of the upstairs rooms. No one there. Head downstairs with bat in hand. By this time, Grandma has shuffled into the living room and I turn the lights on. She wants to know why I'm making all the noise. I tell her someone's in the house. Grandma doesn't look excited at all. She just says, "Go back to bed. I'll tell you about it in the morning." Chills run down my spine.png. I don't believe her. I check the porch, turn on the yard light, go outside, pitch black. I have a flashlight, wind blowing, check the tree line, check behind the house. Nothing. No one at all. Not even tracks. Check the kitchen, check the living room, check in on my grandpa who was sleeping. Take a shit and a piss because I was downstairs anyways. Check on Grandma. Ask her again how she knew no one was in the house. Again she says, "Go to bed. I want you to be able to sleep," and refuses to tell me anything. I decided to trust her and make sure the doors are all locked again, then go back upstairs. Took me like 4 hours, but finally got to sleep at like 3 a.m. Wake up the next day. "Grandma, what happened last night?" She said that she hasn't told anyone about it, but there are ghosts in the house. She said she didn't want to say anything because she was worried we would think she was going senile and put her in a rest home, what we used to call assisted living. But she said since I saw it, I didn't, I just heard it, that she felt like I should know. She made me promise not to tell anyone. I did and didn't, at least until she died. She said that she would often see an old stern-looking man with a brim hat looking at her at the foot of the bed at night. There was always a weird glow around him. She usually just pulled the covers over her head and prayed the rosary and the man went away. She also said that when she would spread sheets on top of the bed, that they would come to rest upon the outline of a child, like a child was under the sheets. And when she picked up the sheets, the child wasn't there. She said she often heard noises coming from the attic in the night, but no one was in the house. This was a common occurrence. She told me if I heard it again to pray the rosary, and I did every night for the rest of the time that I was staying there. That was it. Never heard it again, but I remember this shit like it was yesterday. When they died a few years later, a neighbor bought the house and demolished it. I miss that farm and I miss my grandparents, but I'm kind of okay that the house isn't there anymore. The house was built around the 1900s, and someone once tried to put an apple orchard on it, but apples didn't really grow well in the sandhills, so my grandpa tore all the trees out in the 1940s. I know my grandparents' first child, my oldest aunt, died in the house when she was 2. I think the child that my grandma saw was her. The old dude, I think, was a guy that committed suicide on an adjacent property during the Great Depression. My grandpa and grandma found his body. They eventually bought his farm and made it part of theirs, but his house still stood pretty close to theirs. They used it for storage. The old guy ghost could also have been the guy that built the house and planted the orchard around the turn of the century. Stationed in Korea. Little no-name base, mostly unmanned except for some kind of seismology outpost and a few soldiers doing who knows what. Aviation support or something. Small military police force, but largely a formality as this place is a fucking Mayberry. There aren't enough people to get into any trouble. On the base, there are these little hills that dot the post here and there. These are graves of soldiers killed in the Korean conflict. They were essentially buried where they fell in some areas. Anyways, enough setup. Each shift we needed to do a walking patrol. It's the highlight of my shift because being crammed in a car all day blows. Start mine about 2 a.m. because once curfew starts, People on base get into stupid shit, and now it's my problem. Walking past clusters of graves, see some guy. He looks back at me and ducks behind one of the mounds. Hey, military police, come out where I can see you. No answer. Assume it's some people messing around or something and they're just ignoring me. Go around the back of the mounds. Nothing but shortcut parade field, an area the size of a soccer field. Literally impossible to hide in. Radio into the station. Maine, this is Bravo 110. I'm out of the grave sites with a subject who has fled on foot. Will advise once I find him. No answer. Whatever. Radio guy is a bit lazy. Keep looking around, but there's nothing to look at. Feel like I'm being watched. Radio comes on again. All units, check radio's hot mic. A hot mic is someone transmitting without being aware, leaning on the button or something. It's gotten colder since I've been in the area. At this point, my something's messed up senses are tingling, so I perform a cursory look around the area and GTFO back to the station. Desk sergeant is pissed because he thinks I was the one hot micing. All radio traffic records on our computers, so we play back my calls. Mostly white noise. At one point, you hear me saying I'm on scene, followed by more white noise. We turn up the volume. Some of it is hard to hear, but some is surprisingly audible. It comes through as, Sergeant Long, more rounds, more water, in the tree line. There. Clear as a bell. Wasn't supposed to be like this. Bricks are shat. Sergeant tells me and the radio guy not to mention it to anyone. Next day, have an order not to go near the burial mounds. Like I had to be told. Did a little more digging and found a map on the Chinese attack on Hyeongsong. The 38th Infantry 2nd Battalion. The unit Sergeant Long was stationed is just to the left of the city. The voice over the radio never sounded panicky or anything. I don't think it was a situation they were massively outgunned in. They sounded professional, like a soldier who knew what they were doing. The last one wasn't supposed to be this way. May not have been a dying line. The tone was conversational, like you talk about the weather. Did a little more digging, found a Sergeant Long. His last radio message stated that he was out of ammo. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for manning his post and directing mortar fire until being overrun and killed in Korea. It's on Wikipedia. His last words were more rounds, more water. MFW, more water, said quickly, sounds an awful lot like mortar. So it could have been heard as more rounds, mortar. Be me, German descent. Parents moved to Korea before I was born because of dad going on business trips all the time, plus general parental conflict. Korean's friend's family pretty much raised me as their own. New family is crazy superstitious, which is weird since most of the country now believes in Christianity. Live in the mountains with Korean family for most of my childhood, then moved to the city around high school age. Korean foster family is from North Korea. They all came down during the Korean War. Superstitious grandfather, Christian grandmother, parents who were friends with my parents, always wanted to get out of the mountains. Daughter who's my age was pretty much my only friend. Grandfather is the patriarch and what he says goes. This includes all sorts of weird traditional ceremonies and rituals, and a lot of creepy hiking fishing trips. Generally a pretty chill family. Lots of conflict about grandfather's superstitious bullshit though, and you can kinda see the mom kinda losing her mind over the years for some unknown reason. Live in the middle of BFE nowhere. You have to drive like 30 minutes to reach the nearest town. On the death day of his ancestors, grandfather sets up a mini shrine and prepares a shitload of food. It can only be specific kinds of dishes and has to be arranged according to color and size. After setting up the food on special tables in the living room, grandfather reads a handwritten letter, generally following the lines of, "Everyone misses you, rest well, please take this offering of food in peace," and burns it. He sometimes adds a line about me, something like, "Please excuse the blonde boy, we are taking care of him," as the ritual is usually only performed by the family. Everyone takes turns bowing in a special ceremonial way. When everyone is done bowing, Grandfather turns off all the lights, and everyone hides in the kitchen for about half an hour. You always have to clear your throat before walking out again to not startle the ancestors, Grandfather says. Food is partially eaten, utensils are dirty, and the seat cushions are warm. This one time when I was about 6, the mom tired of making the special dishes. They're time-consuming since they take up the whole day, if not more, and replaced them with easier ones. Grandfather flies into a rage, but we don't have time to redo everything. Do you realize what you've done? And all that. Finish bowing and hide in the kitchen. Hear rattling and banging from the living room. The kids get scared, so me and the daughter hold on to the grandfather while he swears under his breath. An hour later, the noises stop. Grandfather clears his throat, goes out, and turns on the light. The dishes are overturned, candles are out, and something that looks like either dried blood or watery fecal matter, can't remember, is strewn on the shrine. The mom always made the correct dishes from then on. The thing about growing up in rural Korea as a foreigner is that you run into a spirit. They're either going to be extra hostile towards you, or they're going to be too busy laughing at you to kill you. The closest school was half an hour away, so Grandfather would drive me and Jin to school every morning. There were only 7 kids in our grade. Only 3 graduated. The rest either died or moved to the city. The kids were pretty cruel and ganged up on me a lot, calling me names like Yellow Monkey or Yankee, even though I'm German. Grandfather thought school was shit, so he let me skip school as long as I showed up for the exams and passed them. When I was 10, he got me my very own white Jindo, which I named Baekgu. Exploring the mountains and picking/eating mushrooms one day, I hear something rustle in the bushes, and Baekgu starts whimpering, cowering. A black dog-like creature slinks out from the bushes. I freeze in my tracks. I wasn't sure if he was friendly or malicious, but Baekgu was clearly scared and pissing himself. It looked like a cross between a big dog and a leopard, but had a long, almost trunk-like snout. The fur looked like it's ablaze and smoldering, although there is no fire or heat. Convinced myself that this is how I was going to die. I hear a gunshot go off in the distance and remember that Grandfather has his illegal gun. Another gunshot goes off, this time so close to my ears, my whole skull feels like it's ringing, and I can see the bullet whiz by. The fucking thing chases after the bullet and is gone. I hightail it out of there with my dog and Grandfather. One thing about Korean ghosts, both docile and malicious, is that they're very much like people. You can reason with them most of the time, trick them, scare them, and even make friends. Of course, if you just want them to leave you alone, the best thing you can do is start singing, although Grandfather said this could potentially attract Dokei-bai. Be 14. Go to school one day because screw it. When school ends, leave book bag in classroom and go out with Jin to throw out the trash. No janitors at school, so kids help out with the work. Go to pick up bag while Jin waits outside. Teacher is standing with her back to the door, just kind of staring at something on the wall. Say goodbye. She doesn't respond. Get slightly nervous, so ask her if she's okay. She turns around and, oh shit, she doesn't have a face. The thing acts just like the teacher, and it's just heading way too close to the uncanny valley now. Creeped out, but also kind of pissed because I'm a moody teenager and I just want to go home. It starts talking, and even its voice sounds like my teacher. Annan, do you think I'm pretty? Bitch, you don't even have a face. I don't want to piss these things off because Korean ghosts get vicious as fuck when they're mad. If I say you're pretty, it will say I'm lying because it clearly doesn't have a face. If I say you're not pretty, it will say I'm disgusted at its lack of face. I just want to go home and play with my goddamn dog and go fishing. Start singing the Korean national anthem really loudly. Things start screaming, sounding equally angry. I hear the classroom door open, and the screaming stops abruptly. Annan, what are you doing? It's the actual teacher. Run home and bitch about Gui Shins with Jin. Things started falling apart by my mid-teen years. I believe this was because grandfather was getting old and weak, but it just may be because I was pretty messed up emotionally and whatever spirits out there could sense it. B16, doing some chores around the yard when I hear familiar voices. It's my mom and dad. I walk towards their voices, kind of tearing up, because I haven't seen them since I was like 4, and the only reason I remember them are the phone calls that come once every few months. Angry but glad at the same time, my parents are standing at the edge of my grandfather's property. Annan, it's us. Let's go home now. So many things I want to yell at them, but it's like I'm too choked up. Remember, grandfather didn't tell me my parents would be coming for me. I'm going to bring grandfather. Oh, but Annan, aren't you going to let your mother hug her own son? Notice something's wrong about it, but too emotionally shaken. Start crying like a little bitch and kind of stand there. The dogs are barking like crazy. I can hear Jin calling me for dinner from the house. My parents keep urging me to come over and give them a hug and go home. Talk to them. Come on, son, it's going to be a long drive home. Wait a second. Then where's your car? They go quiet, but soon try to play it off as a joke. I keep asking where their car is. They get angry and start threatening me with punishments, saying I'm breaking my mom's heart, etc. I'm still sobbing and hyperventilating, not sure whether to go with them or run back home. I think Jin noticed and told grandfather because he came out with the dog on a leash. Leave my grandson alone. My parents let out something like a cross between a bird screeching and an old door creaking, then disappear into the grass. For some reason, grandfather never speaks of this again.